The champagne flute shattered against Italian marble, golden liquid spreading like my mother's shock across the pristine floor. 3 years, she whispered, her perfectly manicured hand still suspended where the family photo had slipped through her fingers. But how could I explain that her cruelty had given me the greatest gift, a love she never deserved to witness? My name is Sophia, and I'm 31 years old. Standing in my childhood home that Thanksgiving evening, watching my mother's face crumble, I felt the weight of every secret I'd carried. The dining room still smelled of rosemary and judgment, the mahogany table set for 12 with the good china my mother only used to impress people who mattered. I had never mattered. Not when I was 7 and she forgot my school play. Not when I was 16 and she missed my valedictorian speech. And certainly not when I was 28 and fell in love with someone she would have called beneath us. Sophia's still single. My mother had announced earlier that evening, not for the first time. She said it like a diagnosis, something chronic and shameful. My sister Victoria sat across from me, her surgeon husband's arm draped possessively over her shoulders, their 2 perfect children playing quietly with iPads. My brother James and his beauty queen wife posed like a magazine spread. And then there was me, the family's favorite cautionary tale. You know, Mom continued, sipping her wine with theatrical concern, Mrs. Henderson's daughter just married a federal judge. Harvard Law. They honeymooned in the Maldives. She paused, letting the comparison sink in. But I suppose not everyone can be that fortunate. Some people are just meant to focus on their careers. The way she said careers made it sound like a consolation prize. Like my position as creative director at one of Seattle's top design firms was just something to fill the void where a husband should be. Aunt Patricia nodded sympathetically. Don't worry, dear. My hairdresser knows a nice accountant. Recently divorced, but only once. That's when she laughed. That particular laugh she'd perfected over years of charity luncheons and country club gatherings. No wonder you're still single at 31, she said, gesturing at my simple black dress. You don't even try anymore. When I was your age, I'd already given your father 3 beautiful children. But you're too picky. Too independent. Too happy, I interrupted softly. The table fell silent. Forks suspended midway to mouths. Even the children looked up from their screens. Actually, I said, setting down my water glass with deliberate calm, I've been married for 3 years. You just weren't invited. The family photo, the one from Victoria's wedding where I stood at the edge, barely in frame, slipped from my mother's fingers. It hit the floor with a crack that split my carefully posed smile right down the middle. That's impossible, she breathed. I would have known. Someone would have told me. I pulled out my phone, swiping to a photo I'd looked at 1,000 times but never shared. There we were, me in a simple white sundress, wildflowers in my hair, barefoot on a beach in Olympic National Park. And beside me Marcus, his smile brighter than the setting sun behind us, his hand in mine with matching white gold bands catching the light. June 15th, I said, passing the phone to my frozen father. 3 years ago. 60 guests. People who actually love us. My sister Victoria found her voice first. You're lying. This is some desperate attempt for attention. His name is Marcus Chun, I continued, watching my mother flinch at the surname. He's a pediatric nurse. Saves children's lives every day. His parents own a restaurant in the International District, the one you called ethnic when you drove past it. They catered our wedding. Best dim sum you've never tasted. My brother James pushed back from the table. You kept this from us for 3 years? Your own family? Family? The word tasted bitter. Was it family when Mom told me no man would want a woman who worked such long hours? Was it family when you all took bets on whether I'd end up alone with cats? Was it family when Dad said I was the practiced child, and thank God they got it right with you too? My father's face flushed. Sophia, that's not. Marcus proposed after 6 months, I interrupted. In his parents' restaurant, with his whole family cheering. His mother cried and called me her daughter. His father said he'd never seen Marcus so happy. His sister asked me to be her kid's godmother before we even set a date. They didn't care that I worked late. They didn't judge my ambition. They celebrated it. My mother stood slowly, gripping the table edge. You married some nurse? Without telling us? Without asking? Asking what? Permission? Blessing? I laughed, but it came out sharp. When have you ever blessed anything I've done? When I graduated summa cum laude, you asked why I wasn't dating. When I got promoted, you said successful women intimidate men. When I bought my condo, You worried I was settling into spinsterhood. We only wanted what was best, Aunt Patricia started. No, you wanted what looked best. A doctor, a lawyer, someone from the club. Someone you could brag about at brunches. I stood, matching my mother's height. Marcus volunteers at free clinics on weekends. He reads to sick kids during his breaks. He learned to cook my grandmother's recipes from that stained cookbook you threw away. He holds my hand during scary movies and brings me coffee in bed every Sunday. He sees me, actually sees me, not as a project to fix or a disappointment to manage, but as someone worth choosing every single day. Victoria's husband shifted uncomfortably. Still, 3 years of deception. Deception. I pulled out my wedding ring from the chain around my neck. I'd hidden it tonight, one last time. The only deception was pretending you were the family I needed. Our real family includes his parents, his sister, our friends who stood with us that day. My mentor from work who walked me down the aisle because I knew Dad would spend the whole time wishing I was more like Victoria. Our neighbor Mrs. Yamamoto, who taught me to make Marcus's favorite soup when he had pneumonia. That's family. This is ridiculous, my mother sputtered. Sneaking around like teenagers. We didn't sneak. We lived. Sunday dinners at his parents' place where no one counts my carbs or mentions my biological clock. Holidays where people ask about my projects with genuine interest. Birthdays where the gifts aren't self-help books about finding a man. We traveled Prague, Tokyo, New Orleans. We adopted a rescue dog named Biscuit who's probably curled up on our couch right now, wondering why I insisted on coming here tonight. Why did you? James asked quietly. Come tonight. I looked at the shattered photo frame, at my family frozen in their shock. Because I'm pregnant. 12 weeks. And I realized this baby deserves to know the truth about both sides of their family. Even the side that would have tried to ruin the happiest day of my life with their judgment and conditions. My mother sank back into her chair. Pregnant. The word came out strangled. Due in May. Marcus painted the nursery last weekend. Soft yellow with clouds on the ceiling. His mother's already knitting blankets. His father's building a crib. They throw their arms around me every time they see me, like I'm a gift. Do you know what that feels like? To be celebrated just for existing. Tears ran down my mother's face, smearing her perfect makeup. We could have. I would have. Would have what? Planned a wedding you'd control? Invited people I don't know? Made me wear your dress and follow your rules? Told Marcus he was lucky to have me while whispering the opposite to your friends. I gathered my purse, my coat. Around the table, my family sat like a still life, abundance spread before them, but something essential missing. His parents are having Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow, I said. 20 people crammed into their apartment, kids running everywhere, 3 languages mixing in the air. Loud and messy and absolutely perfect. Marcus saved you all seats, just in case. His mother makes extra food every year, hoping this will be the time I bring you. I always tell her you're busy. She doesn't know the truth, that you're not busy, you're just broken. I moved toward the door, then turned back one last time. You want to know the saddest part? When Marcus proposed, the first thing he said wasn't I love you, or marry me. It was, you don't need their approval, sophomore. You never did. And he was right. My father finally spoke. Sophia, please. Let's discuss this rationally. There's nothing to discuss. You can either accept that I chose love over your approval, or you can keep that photo on the floor with all your other broken things. But I'm done apologizing for being happy. I opened the door to leave, but my mother's voice stopped me. Will you send pictures? Of the baby. I looked back at her. This woman who'd spent so much energy trying to mold me into something else, sitting among the ruins of her expectations. Marcus would say yes, I admitted. He believes people can change. He sees the best in everyone, even families that don't deserve it. It's one of the million reasons I married him. I pulled a card from my purse, setting it on the hall table. Our address. Do with it what you want. The November air hit sharp and clean. I sat in my car for a moment, hands shaking as I texted Marcus. Coming home. Bring Biscuit to the door. I need maximum waggy tail therapy. His response came immediately. Already waiting. Your mom's hot chocolate ready. Extra marshmallows. You're brave, baby. Whether they know it or not. I drove away from that perfect house with its perfect gardens and imperfect love. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in our imperfect apartment with its creaky floors and incredible joy. I'd tell his parents about the baby, and his mother would cry happy tears while his father started planning a bigger crib. They'd argue over names in Mandarin while I helped set the table, and no one would mention my ringless past or question my worthiness. 3 years ago, I married Marcus Chin in secret, not out of shame, but out of protection. Protection from people who would have poisoned our beginning with their doubts and conditions. We built our life in private, away from my family's scorekeeping and scalar love. But tonight, I finally understood. It was never really a secret. It was just a love story that began where their limitations ended. And tomorrow, surrounded by people who chose to love us without prerequisites, I'd place my hand on my growing belly and know our child would never have to hide their happiness from anyone. The wedding my mother never attended was perfect precisely because she wasn't there. The marriage she never blessed became beautiful in her absence. And the grandchild she almost missed would grow up knowing that family isn't about blood or approval or living up to someone else's dreams. It's about choosing each other again and again, especially when the world, or your mother, says you're not enough. As I pulled into our apartment complex, I saw them in the window. Marcus holding Biscuit, both faces pressed against the glass, waiting. I parked crooked and ran, not caring who saw. He met me at the door, pulling me into his arms while Biscuit danced around our feet. "How did it go?" he asked into my hair. "About as expected," I mumbled into his chest. But I told them everything. He pulled back to look at me, thumbs wiping tears I hadn't realized were falling. And I'm home," I said simply. "Where I belong." He kissed me then, right there in the doorway with the neighbors probably watching, and I thought about my mother's dropped photo. How sometimes things need to shatter before you can see what really matters. "Come on," he said, leading me inside. "Let me tell you what my mom said when I called her about tomorrow. She's making extra dumplings just in case your family comes. She says hope costs nothing but means everything." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time all evening. "Your mother's an optimist." "She's right though," Marcus said, hand-finding my belly. "Hope does cost nothing. Your family just never learned to afford it." And surrounded by our chosen life, the photos of our real wedding covering every surface, Biscuit's toys scattered on floors my mother would call beneath us, Marcus's scrubs draped over a chair because he saves lives while she saves face. I finally stopped paying the price for their love. Because real love, the kind that celebrates your victories and cushions your falls, the kind that shows up with hot chocolate and waggy tails, the kind that builds cribs and knits blankets and makes extra dumplings just in case. That love doesn't cost a thing. It just requires showing up as yourself and finding people who think that's more than enough. And 3 years ago, on a beach with 60 people who understood that, I married someone who knew I was worth celebrating in secret until I was ready to stop hiding in public. Tonight, I finally was. Tomorrow, we'd tell his family about the baby. Next week, we'd start calling him Marcus Jr. or her little Biscuit. Next month, we'd find out which. And maybe, just maybe, my mother would find our address card and choose hope over habit. But even if she didn't, I'd already found my family. They were waiting for me at home, with extra marshmallows and endless love, in an apartment where no one ever wondered why I was still single at 31.